There's a small set of few things that are really impactful. Those things are making sure that your cross-linking is set up properly. So you're linking across other pages, making sure that Google can even read what's on your page. If your page is empty, it's not going to work that well. That's on the technical side. On the editorial side, write articles that are adjacent to where my topical authority is. So write stuff about LinkedIn pixel tracking. Don't write stuff about Instagram because we don't have any authority there. It's like prioritization of the pieces of content that you have. Making sure that the outline is comprehensive. Making sure that our conversion optimization is set up and people aren't visiting and leaving. On the programmatic side, category pages and product pages. So making sure that those are set up properly, Google can read them. We've launched the ones that, are impactful. If we're Thumbtack, we've launched all the different plumbers plus city combinations. Those are and title tags. That's what's impactful.
Welcome to another episode of the Hypergrowth Experience. I am your host, Nima Gardide. Today, we're going to have Ethan Smith, the CEO of Graphite, on the podcast. He's an SEO expert. He's helped a bunch of companies like MasterClass and Thumbtack scale their SEO efforts. And now he's built a sort of like a tech-enabled services company called Graphite that is helping companies scale their SEO efforts. He's quite knowledgeable in this space. So it was very, very fun for me to speak to someone that has spent their whole career understanding such a craft like this in such depth. And I try to be as sort of like inquisitive as possible. I don't know much about the specific channel. I've had experiences doing it, in my early 20s, which is, over a decade ago now. And a lot has changed since in this space. So it was very interesting to just kind of get an understanding of what it takes to now build these programs. And Ethan's done really great work recently and has been sort of going around on the podcast world. So you might have heard him speak on a few different podcasts. We tried to be a little bit different in the content that we ended up creating together. And we're doing some events in New York if you happen to see or hear this before that. Enjoy the episode. And we start by talking about the overall approach that he uses whenever he's entering a business. Why don't we start with the simplest version of this, which is what is SEO? If you were explaining it to a kid who doesn't understand marketing yet, maybe they are already doing in all these different ways with TikTok, but and all these different new apps that they're using. But what is SEO in a less layman's term, more layman's term?
The way that I describe it is when you search for something, we help companies show up in that search. So usually it's Google search, but to your point, TikTok search, other YouTube search. We help you show up when people search for things.
And if you were to explain it if you had to explain what SEO is to a business owner that maybe has a set of restaurants or a small e-commerce shop, how would you explain what is the value of SEO?
We help you get customers without paying for ads.
That's a good one. And then if you were to explain SEO to a Fortune 500 CEO, would that change the definition?
I would change it slightly. And I would say that a few of your competitors are growing dramatically for free, quote unquote, without paying for ads. And you're not, and you can.
I like that a lot. That's when you get into these hyper competitive situations, you can think of it in that context. One of the things that I think. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I would say for a smaller company, for a large company, there's a fixed addressable market, and you have to compete and take from each other. And there's 5 players, and Walmart needs to take from Target. And if the Target's doing something and taking from Walmart, that's really important. Whereas if you're a smaller business, the TAM is huge. And so you're not really competing directly with a restaurant's not competing directly with another restaurant per se. But when you're large and you're Walmart versus Target, little things that the other competitor is doing matters a lot. So that's why if a few companies are winning in organic, that matters a lot, and you want to beat them.
And that's just because of the nature of search, right? There's only so many people actually searching for things at any given point, and your job is to just capture as many of those queries as possible.
And that's just also the nature of large companies versus small companies. Large companies, there's a Target and Walmart are directly competing for the same people, whereas a small shop, you're not directly competing with other small shops.
One of the things I think I've always had issues with, and I think you've been pretty well spoken about this, and I want to dig into it more with you, is just how to think about SEO when you are trying to plan for growth, right? And there's a couple of maybe aspects to that. One is just budgetary, right? How do I calculate $1 I put in towards SEO versus $1 I put on towards some other program like paid? And then the other part is just sort of timelines, right? So how do I think about the return of this dollar that I'm investing in? And I think you've been pretty well spoken about it, but can you walk me through how you would break those two things down?
Sure. So in terms of the measurement, there's a different curve for paid and for organic. So for paid, as soon as you buy an ad, you get the return on that ad. And it's easy to measure, it's easy to attribute. Whereas for organic, you can launch a page and it might take months for it to start ranking. And then it actually increases over time. Usually it's like 3 to 6 months curve, and it can even continue ranking, getting more and more traffic over time. So the NerdWallet article that was written 10 years ago, or 20 or 15 years ago about best credit cards gets more traffic today than it did last year and the year before that. And they've modified it, but still there is a fixed investment that increases for years and years, which is very different from paid. The ad that you bought 10 years ago is not returning any value. So it's a very different long-term curve. It's kind of like if you buy a house and it's appreciating over time. You don't care if you make a return on that house that you bought the next week. You care about year 5 or year 10. So that's sort of how to think about SEO. In terms of how to measure it, usually what we'll do is we'll look at the first, you don't want to wait 10 years to see whether or not you're getting a return. So you want to look for leading indicators early on. And the leading indicators are you launched a piece of content and maybe you're ranking number 15 for some competitive terms and you're getting no traffic, but you're ranking number 15. And then you rank 12 and then you rank number 8. Maybe you're getting 2 clicks, still not that much. And then you're ranking number 5 and you get a few clicks. And then you're ranking for 20 keywords instead of 1 keyword. And you're ranking number 5 for that. And so it sort of grows over time. But you can look at those leading indicators of ranking for a few keywords, then more, then getting some traffic, then getting a lot of traffic. And you can kind of model that out on a per article or per URL basis so that you can see within the first few months, what do we think is likely to happen over time? So that's roughly, and then you can look at conversion rate. So I have 100 visits, the conversion rate is 5%. So therefore 5 conversions. And that LTV is $10. And so it's $50 for that piece of content. So you can kind of model it out over time. So that's how to think about SEO measurement.
And sorry, before we go to the cost part, did I understand it right that you're looking at on a per content basis? So you're trying to get a sense of how much more this piece of content can rank for what set of keywords? Or is that at the sort of domain level or like the brand level?
We are looking at a per URL level, especially if there's a cost per URL. So if you're creating 1,000 category pages, there's no cost per page. But if you're writing an article or creating a tool, there's a cost per page that you're creating. So just like you would want to know how much your ad costs to purchase, you want to know how much your piece of content or your landing page costs. So the page costs $500 or $1,000, then you want to look at the ROI curve. And if the ROI curve looks good, which it usually does, then you want to spend even more money. You want to launch even more pieces of content. So you want to look at the per URL level, and then you also want to slice it by dimensions. So article versus guide versus tool, different categories. So like home goods, electronics, and then you can slice that, and then you can be really efficient with how you're creating more pages and make more pages around the stuff that has the highest ROI.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Sorry, you can continue to the cost part.
Sure. And in terms of the cost part, do you mean how to think about your spend?
Yeah, there's a couple of parts of it, right? Like how do you allocate on maybe it sounds like different pieces of content you do have to produce. And then much more importantly, as if I'm allocating a budget across SEO versus paid, what is is there like a formula I can use to compare the dollars? Because the time frame, as you mentioned, is very different. So if I'm doing NPV even, right? And most companies are not smart enough to do net present value, but if I'm doing NPV type calculations, what is the time frame to look at comparing the programs such that I can give SEO what it's worth. And I think the point you made quite a few times in different podcasts you've been on recently is that people are under allocating capital to SEO. And so I just want to get a sense of like, if I were to try to use a methodology in order to solve that problem, what is the methodology I could use to compare the dollars?
Yeah, so there's a simple answer and a complicated answer. So the simple answer is we usually look at and it depends on the company. So if you need to raise money in 6 months, then you probably shouldn't spend most of your money in SEO. And if you need to make a return over the next 10 years, it's a great channel. So part of it depends on what makes sense for the company. But the simple answer is we usually benchmark out for 3 years. So, it takes a few months to come up with a strategy, build the pages, launch them. And then traffic starts curving up at month 6, and maybe you'll start making a return at around month 9. And then that value curve is really compelling in year 2. That's kind of the simple way to think about it. And we'll benchmark based on, if I'm Wayfair, I look at Target's traffic and a few other Kohl's, and then what is their traffic? What's the gap? And so that's sort of, we'll create milestones and then we'll timeline it out. That's the simple way we'll measure it. And then also look at conversion rate and LTV. So I already have some traffic. What's the conversion rate on these different page types? Apply that to the traffic that I modeled out, LTV, and then I can model it out over 2 to 3 years. That's the simple answer. But there's a more complicated answer. So each of these can be broken down and be more complicated. So the first thing is attribution, multi-touch attribution. So for something like a Target, last touch is totally fine. But for something like PeerMill or for Descript, you don't just search for ad agency and click a button and then hire PeerMill, or for Notion, you don't just type project management software and then spend thousands of dollars. You've heard of Notion over many, many touch points. Or we work with BetterUp, which is a coaching platform. Most people who use BetterUp, many of them had never heard of BetterUp before and didn't even know that coaching virtually was a thing, but they learned about it over many, many touch points. Ads, email, organic, TV, word of mouth, etc. And so you need to be able to weight each touch. This is obviously challenging to do, but ideally you can do that. And that's a whole other conversation about multi-touch attribution, but that's one thing. The second thing with attribution is, to your point, NPV, or discounted cash flow model. So I launched this piece of content, and for an ad, I get the return immediately, and for organic, it appreciates over time. So how do I value the value of a house that I bought that is not making a return the week after I buy it, but it's going to make an amazing return over the next 10 years? So you can use an NPV or discounted cash flow model. I've never seen anyone actually do that, but you can do that. And so, and I think that you should. And I mean, the measurement error of not doing that is dramatic. For NerdWallet or TripAdvisor, if they said, well, we wouldn't get any traffic next week, so we should just buy a bunch of ads. The fact that they don't have to buy the fact that TripAdvisor gets 80% of their traffic from SEO, it is why TripAdvisor exists. It's how they got all their app installs. So versus another company who's still buying ads. So the measurement error of not looking over a longer period of time is dramatic. So using something like an NPV or a discounted cash flow model will give you a dramatically better measurement, which means that you can have a huge competitive advantage in terms of efficiency of your spend on organic versus paid versus other channels.
But what is the time frame in which you think NPV would work? Is like 12 months enough where it would compete well against like a paid channel? And I think you say 1 week, right? And I can argue that it takes something like 90 days for paid programs to also be useful. If you have attribution set up properly and you're thinking about it in that multi-touch sense as well. So that's kind of the time frame that we look at things, like 90 days. What is the sort of actual return on the cash that we're putting into these programs? I guess I'm just throwing 12 months out there as a random number, but does that make sense? You mentioned 3 years before, which is actually not bad. 3 years is harder to model out, obviously, but there's something there. What makes sense to you?
12 months is too short. I think that 2 to 3 years is what I would look at. That doesn't mean that you have no information for 2 to 3 years or that you will not get a return in 2 to 3 years. But it does mean that your return, the return in year 2 will probably be twice year 1. And the return in year 3 will probably be 2 to 3 times year 1. So I think it's important to look far out, but again, look at leading indicators so that you're not waiting so long before you have any information about whether or not it's performing.
Yeah. Well, those numbers were interesting. It felt non-linear. Do you think there was like what does the curve look like usually? Does it feel non-linear then? It's just like there's some of it, but then all of a sudden it becomes a lot more useful, or it's just like kind of doubling every few years until you hit sort of saturation. Like, what does it look like?
It's sort of an S curve. So when you launch a piece of content, Google doesn't have information about the engagement of that URL. So you test on a small number of keywords, look for engagement. And then as that engagement on a per keyword, it's kind of like a quality score of an ad. Once you have some data, once Google has some data, then they start ranking you higher. So it curves up, and then eventually it'll saturate and get most of the share of that set of keywords. And so then it'll kind of cap out. But that can take over a year. The other thing is that search generally is increasing. So just the number of people searching for any given keyword is increasing. And so it's sort of an S curve, and then it kind of continues to curve up, or not curve up, be linear at the end of the S curve.
Gotcha. And then you introduce new keywords, so then you're compounding over time like that.
Yes. And then the other thing is for your campaign overall, you launched a single piece of content, and the curve for that is an S curve, but you're launching more and more content. So it's all these cumulative sum of the various S curves. Gotcha.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a bit of a tangent, but I'm just curious what you think. Why do you think marketers don't do more NPV-esque analysis? Like what's the blocker, do you think? Because I deal with this a lot, and I want everyone that we work with to do it. I would say 10% of the companies we work with barely do it, get like anywhere close to doing some more of a sophisticated analysis. Why do you think it's not the norm?
2 reasons. So for the first reason, a lot of companies don't even have event tracking set up. So the idea of having a really complicated model, let's just get our traffic and our conversions set up properly to start, and know which channels drove the conversions. For some reason, tracking and metrics are very challenging. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's probably because there's no single owner of it. It's sort of spread, the responsibility is spread across multiple departments. And so it's no one's primary role. And so things just tend to be broken. And if they're broken, then why would I do a sophisticated model? So I think that that is number one. It's just lack of good data. And then also data's in Looker, and then I go into Looker, but I don't know how to use Looker. And so then I have to ask the engineer for this thing. And then, it's this very high friction, metrics are very high friction. So then once I have the data, I want to do all this modeling. And I think that marketers most of them are not super deep in statistics. So doing a net present value is something that they've never heard of before. And it sounds intimidating. And so they just don't look at that. And then the last thing is, I'm probably not going to be working at this company in 2 years. So why would I model out metrics where I'm not even going to be here? Why would I make a 3-year investment when I won't be here in 3 years?
Yeah, that part is an interesting insight. I think like the first two I commonly deal with. The parts where I feel like the companies that do it, it tends to come from way higher up. So usually like the founders or the CEO of the company wants to look at programs in that way and enforces it into the whole org. And that's kind of what I've seen work, where they want a spreadsheet and they want to see the NPVs and they want to see the reasoning behind it, and they want to push back on your assumptions before they sort of let you go through with it. And they tend to do better, anecdotally speaking. But yeah, you're right. Like the tracking part is a mess. I don't think I've been in a single company where it's not a problem. We have some like things that we talk about on how to solve it, but it just seems like a people problem more than anything else. And org problem, as you mentioned. So yeah, it's curious. I want to live in a world where that neither of those are problems, and also like it just feels like there's like a big optimization to be doing in terms of how teams are run. Like we talk a lot about experimentation and running a process and these types of things in the industry. But this metric that is very well studied in totally different parts of company building and well, really just in the capital allocation world, is not being used in this part of growing companies, but it has so many sort of parallels. Anyway.
Yeah, to summarize, I think that it's org design and prioritization. So org design, again, it's not a centralized function. It's distributed across many departments. And so it's hard to actually have a centralized metric system that works well and you have perfect data. And I think it's a prioritization problem, because if someone says on a board slide, my plan for Q2 is to have better measurement, that's not a really compelling slide versus a slide where we're going to launch personalization. That sounds a lot more exciting. But better data means that you're way more efficient with everything. So I think it's a prioritization thing. To your point, some companies prioritize it, most don't, and the ones that do a lot better.
Speaking of org design, I'd love to walk in through maybe an SEO team. So there's maybe two questions I have for you. One is, how would you, if you were to sort of build an internal SEO team, how would you design that team? What types of roles would be on it? Would you always work with an agency or not work with an agency? And then I'm just curious about Graphite and how you guys design your teams around clients.
Yeah, so it depends on the type of company. So I'll define the three kinds of SEO, and then I'll describe how I would set up a team. So the first kind of SEO is technical SEO. Technical SEO is the infrastructure layer. So crawl optimization and your tags and indexation logic and things like that. And usually technical SEO is people spend too much time on technical SEO and not on other things. It matters, but it's not the most important thing. So technical SEO is the first kind of SEO. Second kind of SEO is programmatic SEO, which are pages that are programmatically generated. So a category page, like cameras, and there's a grid of cameras, or product pages individually, the Nikon D40 page, or profile pages. That's programmatic SEO. So where these pages are generated programmatically versus a human sitting down and writing them. And then the third kind of SEO is editorial SEO. And editorial SEO is where someone actually sat down and write something like an article or a guide or a listicle. And all companies can benefit from editorial SEO, but only some can benefit from programmatic. So for Peer Mill or for BetterUp, they don't need programmatic SEO. They just need editorial SEO. And they don't really need much technical SEO either. It's mostly around the editorial side. And so that team is going to be very different than the team that works at Target. So on the editorial SEO side, the way that I would build that is it would primarily be on the content side. So you don't need technical expertise. You don't actually even need to know that much about SEO. What you need to know is how to write really good content. And you need some sort of strategy around what to write about and how to write it, but it's not deep technical SEO expertise. And so at MasterClass, for example, the team was excellent at content, and they didn't have a lot of SEO experience, and that was totally fine, and it was actually better. So all they needed to know was what to write about and what the structure looks like, and then they can do really well. So more specifically, how I would structure that team would be, it needs to be separate but aligned with the brand content team. So the brand content team, a common issue is that the brand team needs to be really careful about making sure that the brand is always described in a particular way consistently. So you want to be cautious. You don't want to describe yourself, like if you're Grammarly, you don't want to describe yourself as a spell checking tool. It's a writing enhancement tool. And you want to be really careful about that. But for editorial SEO and growth, you do not want to be careful. You want to be very aggressive, and you want as much traffic as possible. You don't want to be too cautious about, well, we don't want to write about, for BetterUp, we don't want to write about 5-year plan or something else because we don't have 5-year plans, but that's fine. We want to get as much exposure as we possibly can. So there's brand content and growth content, and neither is better. They're just different. And so growth content should be aggressive and brand content should be really cautious and careful. So we'll usually say, well, let's generally be aligned on how we talk about the brand, but the growth content team is a separate track and should be aggressive. And so that team is going to be a content manager, editor type of a person, content strategy person. And that's basically it. So that person manages a group of writers. You're prioritizing which topics to write about, outlines, optimization of title tags, measuring that. But it's more of a content role than a pure SEO role. That person can be in-house or external. I think that the key thing that the content person needs is just to know which pieces of content we should create, which topics, and the outlines. And that could be internal or external. So that's how I would set up an editorial team. And again, that could be with or without an agency. Either model's fine. Programmatic SEO is completely different. And for the editorial SEO side, none of this is touching the core website. You don't need to meet with other teams to, change the product page and change the category pages and get into the core code base. This can be a completely separate autonomous track. Programmatic SEO, completely different. So if I need to change the category page on Walmart, I need to have multiple meetings with, multiple departments asking questions. This touches many parts of the org. I can't just make my own category pages and do whatever I want. So now you need to be part of the core product. And the common problem with this is that the product team for the category page is not necessarily, doesn't have their goal around SEO traffic. So if the SEO team says, I want this thing, that doesn't necessarily get prioritized because the product team has a bunch of other priorities. And so frequently it's just hard to get things prioritized, or there's a conflict with, I want to show 50 products, but the core product team wants to show 20 products because the page is faster if there's 20 products. So you have competing priorities, direct conflict of priorities, and also just hard to prioritize that stuff. So how to do that well? I don't think that there's a single correct answer, but option one is that the core product team has a goal around impact and results and conversions. Like, I want more products sold at Walmart. And therefore, it would make sense to have SEO be a part of that. And so that could be just that product team owns SEO. Or there's a separate SEO specialist team that says, here's how to do this, show 50 instead of 20, show more tags, add links, and then it gets prioritized well. There's no single correct solution, but that's typically how I see it.
Is there a version of it where the category pages that people see coming in from SEO would just be different than ones that you see if you're logged in, for instance?
Yes, you can definitely do that. And we've done that before, where the internal product page, an example would be the internal product page is rendered with JavaScript and it's asynchronously loaded and different components are being loaded at different times. And Google can't see any of that. The page is empty, which is not uncommon. So we could either say, please, engineering team, please completely rebuild this page just for our SEO team, which is a hard ask. Yeah. Sometimes it happens, but it's a hard ask. Or SEO team could say, well, we'll just make a static version of this, or we'll make a separate SEO landing page version of this. And that can work really well. But then you need to talk with the engineering team and say, hey, we're going to duplicate the exact same thing that you already did with this different code base just for Google. That could work, but it's also, sometimes a difficult conversation to have. But that is a good solution, and we've done that before. So I do recommend that as something to consider.
And would you say, so that's an interesting thing around the loading part. Is Google still, and it's 2023 when we're having this conversation, not waiting to render JavaScript-based pages? They're still looking for fully static pages?
No, they look at JavaScript, but they struggle to index everything on the page frequently. So there's two passes of the crawler. First pass is without JavaScript, server side. Second pass is with JavaScript. The common problem is that for the second, and if your page is completely in JavaScript, that could be totally fine. It oftentimes is. Like, I think Pinterest was, and probably still is, completely JavaScript based, and that's totally fine, and everything's indexed properly. There's two problems that happen with that though. So the first problem is hybrid rendering. So this is where part of the page is server side and part is JavaScript. And the crawler, if the crawler thinks that they got everything that they need with the server side rendering without JavaScript, they will not do the second pass. And so if you have an article, we actually saw this specific example. So if you have an article that is that we had an article and supplementary content below. So if the article was, let's say, 20 words, it was a poem or a haiku poem, it's 20 words. Google will say, I didn't get everything I needed. I'm going to look at the rest of the page and index that. Now, if the article is 300 words, then Google says, I got everything I need, and I will not look at the supplementary content. It's like the cross-linking of different articles. So the length of the server-side rendered piece matters. The shorter it is, the more the crawler says, I need more. The longer it is, it says, I don't need it. And it is common to have part of the page, especially the top part, indexed, and then all this cross-linking and supplementary content is ignored. And so now you have a product page with no cross-linking. So you have the description and the price, but there's no cross-linking because of this hybrid rendering issue. Or reviews are not crawled. So like reviews are asynchronously loaded and they're not seen. And we see this frequently. So hybrid rendering is problem one. Problem two is everything's on the loaded on the JavaScript side, but it's asynchronously loaded, and maybe the reviews are not loaded until the user scrolls to save on performance, which is very reasonable. Google can't see that then, and so we see this happen regularly. So Google can read JavaScript, but it depends on how you're loading it, and you can QA this by taking your URL and then doing site:URL. And then taking different parts of the page and then having an exact match snippet. So if you want to know if your reviews are getting indexed, site:that URL, and then take a snippet from a review and then put it in quote marks and then look to see if Google has it. And if they have it, then it's indexed. And if they don't, then it's not indexed.
That's cool. So within the Google search bar, you're doing site:, putting the full URL.
Yes. And you cannot just look at URL inspection or the cached version, because the cached version does not fully represent what's seen. And so sometimes the cache version is empty, but it's actually all indexed. And the URL inspection tool in Search Console is good, but it does not tell you this. The only definitive way to know whether or not things are getting indexed is this site:, exact match snippet, which is obviously, an odd, it's not a clean analysis way to do it, but I mean, it does work. And that's the only definitive way to check that.
Yeah, because my understanding was that they had started crawling JavaScript stuff, but it sounds like there's a lot of nuance there. Would you, if you were to start from scratch, would you just not do JavaScript and still recommend static? Or as long as you know about these things and, it sounds like there's a couple of like obvious routes to fix this stuff up, you would be okay with JavaScript based pages?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I should clarify client side rendered versus server side rendered. So would I not do client side rendered? I would not recommend. I would not recommend against client side rendering. That's sort of a broad stroke against a pretty good technology. So I wouldn't just broad stroke. Don't use this modern technology for SEO. Build however whatever you think is the best way. And then QA it, and if it's not working, then fix it. Obviously,
there was like sort of a rush of libraries that came about just to solve this. I think Next.js was maybe a popular one coming in to help people produce pages on the server side, so they're not being sort of rendered on the client side. And now their new version kind of just is a hybrid, which I like a lot. Cool. So this makes sense. So there's programmatic, and in that team, it sounds like there is like a product lens. So are these product managers that are doing it? Is it like a SEO specialist that's embedded in a product team? Like what have you seen and what do you recommend?
Ultimately, the decision will come down to whoever the product person is for that category page. The SEO manager cannot make that decision. So that decision is from the product manager. So ideally, that product manager, who does not need to be an SEO expert, but they own the category page, they're a product expert, they're not an SEO expert. Their goal needs to be around their goal needs to be, SEO needs to be a part of their goal, probably something around conversions. So the goal and the incentives need to be aligned with this. And then I would, as embedded as possible, having that SEO person. So that could either be an internal SEO person who's on that team, or an external group who's, giving the strategy to that product person. Either can work, but the decision is not with the SEO manager, it's with the product manager. And the goal of that product manager needs to be aligned with impact and SEO in order for this stuff to get prioritized.
Cool. So let's go into okay, let's say you have a team now and you want to go after a bunch of keywords. Do you think in keywords, I heard you talk about topics, like, first of all, what is the difference between a keyword and a topic? And how do you get started? Do you just into it? Oh, if I were to search for this product space, or like the product that I'm trying to sell, here's the set of keywords I would search for. Like how do you go for step one of this?
Yeah. So the difference between keywords and topics, keywords is a single individual search query, like 5-year plan, and topic is that concept. And the concept of 5-year plan has 500 different keywords that are minor variations of each other, like 5-year plan example, 5-year plan template, personal 5-year plan. There's all these different variations of how to describe the concept or the topic. So the topic is a one-to-one map with that URL. So this URL, this single URL or single topic, is targeting many keywords. And so that's the difference between the two. And your second question was how do you think about the strategy? So I want to rank for 5-year plan, or let's say I want to rank for 5-year plan template. Then I look at the search volume. The search volume is 100 searches a month. It's not that many. So I say, I'm not going to make this piece of content. But in reality, the search volume is 50,000 because you didn't know all the different keywords, and the search volume for all of them is much larger. So we have internal tools that do this, but essentially what you'd want to do is take 5-year plan template, map that to a set of URLs. So there's 50 different articles about 5-year plans. So you look at all 50 of those, and then you look at the keyword overlap of all those, and then that is your keyword cluster. Then the opportunity is the sum of the volume of all of those keywords, the 500 of them. And number one. Number two is that the piece of content needs to target this entire set of 500 different keywords. So templates, examples, personal versus professional. So that's generally how we do topic research. That is obviously a lot of work, and it's imprecise. So when you hire an SEO person, usually their job is to go into SEMrush and download a bunch of keywords, put it in a spreadsheet, and make guesses about what keywords go with what. And they can't go through hundreds of keywords. For one URL, you can't go through 500 different keywords manually. And you don't actually know what should be grouped. So maybe professional 5-year plan should be a separate article, and you don't actually know that. And so you might write 5 articles when you only needed 1, or you might write 1 article when actually you needed 5, and now you can't compete for a bunch of the keywords because you didn't know this. So the measurement error, again, of this keyword clustering is very large, and it's impossible to do manually. So on our side, we built internal tools to be able to do this clustering, but essentially the clustering is, again, for 5-year plan example, find the 50 different URLs that are ranking for this, find out the keywords that they're ranking for, and look at the keyword overlap of all of these. And that's essentially what your keyword cluster is.
Is this data from Google itself, or you're pulling this data off of different sources? And I assume there's some of that information in Google's APIs alone, right? Would they help you with keyword planning?
No, there's none of this none of this comes from Google voluntarily giving you the information. The way that this comes is with SERP scraping. So you take a URL for 5-year plan, and then you scrape. You get a bunch of keywords. The keywords would probably come from Google Ad Planner, and you have your own internal keyword data. So then you take all these different keywords, like 5-year plan template, 5-year plan example. Then you scrape Google as SEMrush or Ahrefs do. So scrape Google, look at the different URLs that are showing up, and then do this for all the different keywords that you can find or that you have. And then again, you're looking for which URLs are overlapping with each other frequently. So for 5-year plan template and 5-year plan examples, 8 of the top URLs are the same. Therefore, it's a group. Therefore, these two keywords are related to each other. But almost none of this is coming from Google. It's coming from SERP scraping, essentially.
And SERP stands for?
SERP stands for Search Engine Result Position. So this just means that, for 5-year plan examples, which URLs are showing up in what order. So this article shows up number 2. So their SERP position is number 2.
Gotcha. So you're basically creating these topics, or like the idea is basically there is like, if I were to maybe abstract it, there are these words that correlate a lot with these sets of other words to Google. And so when I'm searching them, I'm kind of finding these sets of different URLs. And if you want to compete on that general topic, then you should be producing content that doesn't just address these like obvious keywords, but there's all these like cluster of ideas and keywords that are related to it. And so are you mentioning all of those 500 different keywords in one article, or is it just more like you're alluding to them? Like, what is the content strategy from that idea?
Yes. So this comes, this gets into content outlines or topic outlines. So for 5-year plan, we have 500 different keywords. So the simple idea is make sure that every single word in all 500 is mentioned. That does not lead to a good piece of content that's useful.
Yeah.
And it's also not how the algorithm works. So what you actually want to do is you want to synthesize all 500 and look for themes and write about those themes. So users are generally looking for examples of 5-year plans and templates and professional versus personal. Those are
on
themes.
This specific topic, because you've already done this work about this 5-year plan thing.
Yes. But when you go through your 500, you're looking for general themes of subtopics, and this informs the outline. And this is the second job of the SEO manager or the content manager is tell the writer the themes. So if you don't give examples of a 5-year plan and people are looking for that, you have a gap in your content and it's not comprehensive. So part of how the algorithm is looking for good content, quote unquote, is comprehensiveness. Did you cover everything or did you not? Did you need to go to another result because you didn't have this thing that the users wanted, or did you have everything? And so the content score is basically looking for this comprehensiveness of all the different subtopics. And again, it's very hard to go through 500 of these. And so people don't do that. And the result is that they're missing things. And if you do that, you get a better content score. So it can be a huge competitive advantage. So that's one thing about comprehensiveness. And then the second thing that Google's doing is they're looking for co-occurring terms. So by that, I mean basil and lemon co-occur disproportionately on the internet. So if you have a recipe about chicken piccata, make sure to mention lemon or make sure to mention basil because these things co-occur. And this is how some of the tools like a Clear Scope or a Market Muse work, which is they're looking at, given a keyword, what are all the overrepresented terms that are appearing? So for 5-year plan, examples is co-occurring. So make sure to mention that. But you don't want to look at it at the keyword level. You want to abstract it at the concept level. So don't just add this word. Cover the general concept of examples. And Google actually has said that they specifically look at the subtopic and paragraph or concept level, not individual words. So again, you don't want to just add words because add the word examples 5 times. You want to cover the concept generally.
It's almost like the information about what is going to make this thing comprehensive. And so like, yes, lemon being there really just means like make sure the full recipe is there and you're describing how to make it and not just put the word lemon in there because that's going to make it work.
Yes. And so this is how to get a good content score with the algorithm, but it's 1-to-1 with what users want. So it's also helpful for users. Users want examples. And if you have examples, then you're going to get better engagement than if you don't have examples. Therefore, your engagement score is higher. Therefore, your rank is higher. Engagement is a high weight input as well. So for both the content score and for engagement, you want things to be comprehensive and you want them to be useful and high quality. If you have thin, non-useful content, maybe your content score will be fine, but your engagement will be bad, and then you'll rank less. So having high quality content that's comprehensive and useful, directly results in impact.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's similar to actually, like, I think ads, we have quality scores, and it's like similar thing. If you're ending up converting, that's a very positive thing, and it's a very positive signal for your ad and the quality of it. Even both, but almost every ad network basically has the same approach to it. So I'm quite familiar with that. It makes a lot of sense to me. So now that we've done this and people are arriving on this site and they're getting the value, so they search for, like, here's an example. I want a 5-year plan. And you go in there and there's like a very clear template for how to build a 5-year plan. I personally struggle to then build that into a conversion. Like I think whenever I've thought about these SEO pages, it's a bit unclear to me how to organically take that into telling the user now who we are as a company and you should use us or work with us and so on and so forth. So are there like heuristics you use on thinking about that? Does the topic matter? Is different per maybe like the concept and how high the intent of that topic is to the product that the company's providing, or the service the company's providing? Or is it the same? It doesn't matter. Just put the sign up button somewhere and do usual CRO things and it's going to work. Like, how do you think about that part?
There's a measurement piece and there's an optimization piece. So the measurement piece is multi-touch attribution. So for target, last touch is fine. You can just look at the conversion rate for last touch, the people who came in, how many bought a product, and that's pretty straightforward. For the better up example, you need to do multi-touch ultimately to have proper attribution. But you can do a lot to optimize. So yes, to doing typical CRO things, but the highest impact stuff on CRO is not obvious and is typically not done. There's a ton of upside for high quality conversion optimization. So essentially what you're doing is you want to build the intent of the user over time. So for better up, it's not, I need to get them to subscribe and pay right now, but I generally want to build their intent over a long period of time. I do that, and a lot of SEO content does not do that. So it's common to search for something, land somewhere, get useful information, leave, and have no idea where you read that, and that view had no value at all. But you want to build the intent of the user. It's kind of like if you have a TV ad and people love the ad, and you never mention the company that the ad was for. That would not be a useful TV ad. You want to tastefully remind the user and have them remember that the ad was for Ford trucks, versus it's beautiful mountains and it never mentions Ford. So the way that you can do that, the bad way you can do that is put a big pop-up and say, you need to subscribe to my email newsletter. People don't like that. So we don't recommend that. But you want to understand the intent of the user and try to have conversion elements and intent building elements that are related to that intent. So again, newsletter, if I'm searching for 5-year plan, newsletter is not my intent. But my intent is, well, I would like a template that I can download for a 5-year plan, and then I can start creating my plan. And Better Up is mentioned as there's the logo and the download of the template. Maybe we get your email when you download it. HubSpot does a good job of this. They have a lot of templates that you can download, artifacts that you can download on each page. It's branded as HubSpot. You sign up in order to get that. I want to sign up because I want this template. It's not because of a newsletter I don't want. I have a goal of actually making something. So I do want to download this. So that the conversion element is directly related to my intent. So downloadable artifacts can work well. Quiz flows can work well. Widgets like a mortgage calculator, videos, to just have a video where you can watch it and see what Better Up generally does. Images with a logo on it. So rather than an image with no logo on it, put the logo there. All of these things are related to your intent and they're tastefully done. They're not intrusive. And now the value of that visit is substantially higher. It could be 500% higher, 1,000% higher. Just like, again, the TV ad that never mentioned Ford trucks. If you mention Ford trucks over and over again, tastefully, the intent goes way up. Yeah.
And then that number you just said, like, 500% higher, it'll show up in a multi-touch attribution model if you show that you're making these changes in a way that brings the value of these articles up in terms of conversion and not just in terms of getting people to come to these pages, it sounds like.
For sure. And then the other thing that I would say is, so this is intent building on the page, but then you can create a loop. So the loop would be, I get a visit that comes in on SEO. Now I can pixel them and now I can retarget them. So I didn't have that user pixeled and now I do because of this SEO event. Or I got an email, I got somebody to sign up to, or give us their email to get this template. Now I can market them with email marketing. So if you can create these loops, or if somebody shared my content because it was useful on social, now I get some traffic from social. So not only do you want to build the intent on that view, but you want to create loops across other channels.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You just want to put it in the whole ecosystem of how you're trying to market folks. One question around this. So I think generally the process makes sense to me. Now, if I'm early in this process of just hired an agency or I'm just like working on this, or even maybe in later stages where you're trying to change the dynamics of your organic traffic, how do you, what are the sort of metrics you would use to keep the team accountable on something like this? Is it just production? Are you looking a little bit deeper than that? Is it just top line, at the very least visits or revenue? How would you sort of judge an SEO team's performance?
For late stage, you can just look at conversions. So for target, I want to know how many products we sold. And that's how you would judge that. How many products we sold from this channel. For an early stage company, that's not possible. So we usually say do not focus on conversions from the beginning because you didn't have time to even build the conversion events on the page. Focus on visits first. Once you get the visits, then focus on conversion. And before visits come, it's the leading indicators that I described. So if I'm running, if I'm doing SEO at Peer Mill and we haven't done SEO before, milestone 1 is I want a few pieces of content that are ranking number 8 for a set of terms. And maybe there's a very small amount of traffic, but I have these leading indicators that with a few pieces of content, I can rank competitively. So that's milestone 1 is ranking for key terms for a small set of content. That's milestone 1. Milestone 2 is ranking for more things. So I had 5 articles, milestone 1. I have 50 articles or 50 landing pages, milestone 2. And now the traffic is starting to curve up. And now I know if I go from 50 to 500, I can get even more. So milestone 2 is getting some amount of traffic at 50 pieces of content. Milestone 3 is traffic is now growing. I have 500 pages. Now I can start working on conversion. And now I want to start looking at total number of conversions, probably total number of conversions per piece of content or overall. That's milestone 3. And then milestone 4 is just growing that as much as we possibly can.
And in the first milestone, you mentioned ranking for a set of like sort of high value keywords. Is it ranking at all that we're showing up on like page 2? Or are you saying like competing at the top like 5 of the results? Like what is that feasible in the early days of this process? Or is that something that comes after you're sort of getting more authority over time with Google?
It is possible to rank on page 1 for competitive terms, even if you're very early. So Peer Mill, for example, I was looking at some of your keywords and you're ranking competitively with very little authority for LinkedIn Pixel Helper, which has a decent amount of search volume. And you've done very little SEO. So we also work with a company, Practice.do, which is a coaching software platform. So if you're a coach, you can sign up on Practice to be an online coach and run your business. And we started with them right when they started. They had very few links. They actually still don't have that many links. And they're able to rank number 1 for coaching sessions and top 5 for some very competitive terms. So if you're only ranking on page 2, I think that's not a great goal. You want to rank on page 1 for some competitive terms. And that is possible early on. It's hard, but it's possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Going back to us, I'd love you to go through more of what you found because you did some work on Peer Mill and sort of your thought process and what you discovered. And just to close the loop around that LinkedIn Pixel Helper thing, it was basically a Chrome extension we built to help people find out what pixels they have on their site for LinkedIn. And it was recently actually brought down by LinkedIn. They didn't like that we would use their name in the Chrome extension, which we might relaunch it. But I think it has something like 20,000 active users still, just because of that page that we put up and organically hit the. No one had this product, so it was just a blue ocean thing, but a lot of people wanted it, and it immediately became quite big.
Yep. And then your question was just how would we generally use that and do more with it? Yeah.
So now that you've seen this set of keywords are working, we have all this other content that we produce without really thinking of it in this way. Is the way we've thought about content production historically has just been in the sales process. What pieces of content could we use to keep folks warm, right? And for context, we're going after tech companies and these slightly bigger companies. The sales cycle, as you had mentioned earlier, for a company like ours is very long. And we don't want them to ideally, maybe they discover these articles by themselves, but a lot of the work we do is just our sales team will send the articles to the leads in which the article is very relevant to, and then use that to show our authority of how we are good at growth and good at CRO and production of creative and so on and so forth. So we haven't really looked at production of content from an SEO lens. But that probably means there's all this information sitting there that we could use to rank for some keywords that we would want to be ranking for.
Yes. And what I would do is, because PeerMill hasn't done a lot of SEO, you don't have a lot of authority. But you want to look at where you have the authority, and you want to do things that are adjacent to that, which gets into topical authority. So currently, PeerMill ranks for LinkedIn Pixel Helper, LinkedIn Insight Tag Chrome Extension. And so you're going to rank for things related to LinkedIn Pixel generally. So beyond just Pixel Helper and tracking, or an extension specifically to do that, you will generally rank for things related to LinkedIn Pixels. So now you can create a guide and how-to content about LinkedIn Pixels, or we want to get people who are really high intent and who would want to use PeerMill. So people who are looking for specific niche problems around pixel tracking issues is probably very high intent. And so now we can rank for those, even though we haven't done much SEO because of this tool, even though it doesn't exist anymore. So now let's find topics that are adjacent to LinkedIn Pixel Helper broadly, which is LinkedIn Pixel's topics in general. So let's go through all the different problems with tracking pixels. Let's generally go through LinkedIn tracking as a general subject, and we'll probably actually rank quite well for that. And then if we want to go into Instagram ads, then we can have an Instagram tool and get some topical authority there because of the tool. And now we can have how-to guides about various issues around Instagram tracking. And then if we want to go into TikTok, same thing. Again, because we're early, we don't have a lot of authority. Good way to build authority is with these tools that people share. And then you do stuff that you do articles and guides that are adjacent to those areas.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So it's almost like there is the beginnings of a fire in there. Let's just pour more gas there and just go around it and use that initial authority that we built on a set of keywords, and then go into the tangential topics. Well, first it sounds like subtopics, and then next the tangential topics around those, so then we can continually expand the authority around it.
Yes.
How does authority work if we're just to double click on authority in general? It sounds like there is some of it is just people coming to your site and getting value. So that I understand how Google would track that. If they click on some search result and they end up not having to search more around that topic, they clearly have like a signal that this was a very useful article. I remember there was like a craze for backlink building. Is that still something that goes on? Are there other things I just don't know about, like maybe video content being about your product or something like that, that Google has put in the ecosystem on how they understand and put authority behind your brand?
Yeah, there's two different pieces. One is a direct input of authority, and the other is engagement. So on the engagement side, when people search for LinkedIn Pixel Helper and they click on you, If they go back and go somewhere else, that's a bad engagement signal. But if they stay on PRMill and engage with it and maybe download something, that's a good engagement signal. And so the more people have good engagement, the more that you'll have engagement authority for that one keyword. And then Google will test it on things that are adjacent to that, like LinkedIn pixel tracking. They know that those are similar, the distance between those two keywords is short. So therefore, they're going to test you on that. And then if people click and stay on you disproportionately, now you're going to rank better for that. Then they're going to test you for LinkedIn tracking generally. And now you have good engagement for that. And so that your engagement authority score is based on people clicking on you and staying and getting the answer. Then there's a separate set of inputs, which are things like backlinks, shares, branded search, that also feed in. Branded search is probably the largest, most impactful authority signal other than engagement. And so that would be PRMill LinkedIn or PRMill Instagram. So the inclusion of your company name and then a modifier. And that's essentially like a backlink that says Instagram for branded search. And the more people that type in it, let's say that 10,000 people typed in PRMill LinkedIn, you're going to rank really well for LinkedIn within days. And this is, again, people going to Google and typing in PRMill LinkedIn. You're going to rank for things, anything related to LinkedIn. So that's branded search. Backlinks would be the New York or USA Today linked to PRMill and it said LinkedIn. You're going to rank better for things containing LinkedIn. You wrote an article that went viral about LinkedIn tracking, and it got shared a lot on other platforms like Twitter and Pinterest and Facebook. That's going to give you authority. One interesting example I'll give you, we are on the engagement side. So I asked the team, we haven't actually ironically done any SEO for Graphite. So we just built a website in December, November. We basically didn't have a website before. And I wanted to rank for SEO agency. And so the title tag before just said Graphite. So the first thing we did was add SEO agency to the title tag. So now we started ranking, but we ranked number 70 for SEO agency, which is not very good. So then I tried a test where I asked the team to go to Google and type in SEO agency and go all the way down to page 7 and click on us. And we had about, let's say 50 people on the team do this. And within a few hours, we went from number 70 to number 4 on Google for SEO agency across the entire United States. Ahead of Neil Patel and companies with tons of authority. We probably have like 20 backlinks, almost nothing. But basically, because the click-through rate was disproportionately high for number 70, like nobody goes to number 70 and clicks 50 times in a day. The signal said the click-through rate is really high, so I need to rank them much, much higher. And this is a very competitive term with SEO agencies who are specifically targeting this, who are good at SEO. And we were able to get to number 4. I think we actually maybe got to number 3. And we stayed there for about 2 days, and then we dropped down to like number 30. But this is just a very tangible recent example where click-through rate on Google has a very high weight.
Very high, yeah. Wow, that's quite interesting. And that it feels like an easy sort of like, let's boot this up. Let's just see what our numbers are going to be after we boost it up a little bit by just getting a bunch of people clicking on it. And are they smart enough where they're all in the same office, or you have a remote team? And so it helped that people from like all around the US were clicking on something like this. I assume they're smart enough to realize everyone in the company is clicking on it in this one IP address. They're not going to sort of put that and use that as a signal.
Yeah, Google's very sophisticated about looking for actual clicks. And I mean, these are actual people around the US and Canada who are searching for it. It's not like we're not fooling the algorithm. Like the algorithm would want to know if real people are searching for something and clicking on a result, it should rank higher. It's very hard to manipulate and to do, with bots. It won't work with hiring a bunch of people. Used to do this with Amazon Mechanical Turk, where they tried to manipulate click-through rate, and it did work this is 10 years ago. It did work briefly, but they shut that down. So they're very sophisticated in looking at things like the IP is the same. So I wouldn't suggest invest time trying to figure out how to spam it, because it'll be nearly impossible. What I would say is get real people. And again, our team did this, and then we dropped back down in 2 days. So you need it to keep on happening. And we're not going to ask our team every single day to search for SEO agency and click on us. So you want real people doing this if you want this to actually last. And the way that you can do that, number one, is to just have good content that people would want to read, and you had comprehensive content that was useful. And then the other one is to have a compelling title tag. So this is why people do 10 best and things like that, is the click-through rate goes up if the title tag is really compelling. So spending a lot of time optimizing your title tags and having them be clickable, same with ads. Having that be clickable will increase the click-through rate.
Interesting. And so for that, something like that, you're just looking at the click-through rate of keywords on your search console. If you're running experiments there, you can simply just change it and then look for the change posts.
You can do that. You can also just look at traffic. So if you're on page 1, and we did this test with Thumbtack. So we had plumbers in Santa Monica, and then we tried 10 best, 20 best, 30 best, 50 best, top, the best of 2023. And you could look at click-through rate in Search Console, and then you can also just look at traffic. So if the visits go up, then it's working.
Can you share which one won in that group of tests, or is that trade secret?
I can. And I mean, if you look for plumbers in Santa Monica, you'll see a lot of top 10 lists, and that's because the top 10 lists do the best. So what we found is that 40 did better than 50, and 30 did better than 40, and 20 did better than 30, and 10 did better than 20, and 10 and 5 did equal. So 10, basically fewer is better, because you don't, as the user, you don't want to go through 50. 10 is a good number and 5 is a good number. That's enough. That's not too many to go through, but it's enough so that you have options. So 5 to 10 usually does the best.
Yeah, that makes
and best does better than top.
Yeah.
Slightly better than top.
Cool. So as you were saying this, there's like a part of maybe we should address before we wrap it up, which is sort of what not to do. And I think there's like plenty of maybe information out there on how to be good at SEO, and some of them are very bad and could penalize your success. So what are the maybe things that are commonly spoken about in the industry, but you just believe it should not be done anymore, or it's just an old version of how Google used to rank sites and they should be ignored?
I wouldn't say that there's a lot of things that people say that are harmful. I would say that there's a lot of things that people say that are true and not impactful. Most SEO work is not impactful. And what I've observed is that a lot of consultants and agencies and SEO people will optimize for amount of work done versus for impact. It's like, how many slides, how many little tasks, how many data analyses can I have? And I just give you as much data and as many tasks as I possibly can. And the client says, wow, this is a lot of work that you did, a lot of stuff. And I'm optimizing for amount of stuff. But really what you want is impact. And so then what happens is you work on a bunch of stuff and you get no results. And all of it's true. Like, you fix this alt tag that was empty, which is a true thing. It's better to have an alt tag, but it doesn't drive any impact. And so I would say that it's mostly around prioritization. And the distribution of the stuff that's impactful versus not is probably 95-5. It's not even 80-20. There's a small set of a few things that are really impactful. Those things are making sure that your cross-linking is set up properly. So you're linking across other pages, making sure that Google can even read what's on your page. If your page is empty, it's not going to work that well. That's on the technical side. On the editorial side, write articles that are adjacent to where my topical authority is. So write stuff about LinkedIn pixel tracking. Don't write stuff about Instagram, because we don't have any authority there. It's like prioritization of the pieces of content that you have. Making sure that the outline is comprehensive. Making sure that our conversion optimization is set up and people aren't visiting and leaving. On the programmatic side, category pages and product pages. So making sure that those are set up properly, Google can read them. We've launched the ones that are impactful. If we're Thumbtack, we've launched all the different plumbers plus city combinations. Those are and title tags. That's what's impactful. The giant list of 100 different things of alt tags missing and a one URL has spam on it, like that's not impactful. So it's mostly around prioritization. One common thing, I just had a LinkedIn thread about this, is page speed. So page speed is a factor, and it's a teeny tiny factor, quote unquote. But it's one of the few things that you can measure. You can actually measure page speed, and you know that it's impactful because Google said it is. And so people will latch on to page speed. And page speed is useful because a faster page means better engagement. But it's more so around, if your page takes 20 seconds versus 1 second, your engagement will be bad. That's why it matters. As a ranking signal, it's a teeny tiny factor. Google has specifically said this is a teeny tiny. It is a factor, and it's teeny tiny, and it's very high scope frequently. So if you want to get from 20 seconds down to 5 seconds down to 1 second, that's a lot of work, and I would only prioritize it based on engagement. But again, it's something that is true but low impact typically. And there's a huge list of other stuff in SEO that is true and not impactful. The stuff that's impactful are some of the things that I listed. Most other things are not impactful.
The amount of work it takes from 20 seconds to 5 might be not that crazy, but 5 to 1 gets all of a sudden way harder and probably has very diminishing returns. And so like having the engagement as the metric or as the way you want to be judging that instead of just these raw numbers of how many milliseconds it takes to load this thing probably makes a lot more sense. Wow. So this is cool. Like that. And then the reason for having a lot of sort of backlinks, or not backlinks, like a cross-linking is because Google is not actually that good at indexing all your pages. So you want to give it more opportunities to keep following through and finding your pages easier. Is that sort of the thinking there?
It's slightly different. So, and this is one of the most, one of the least understood areas. Let's say that you have a site with 1 million pages, and you have 1 million articles, and you have no cross-linking. Google will probably find all of your pages, or most of them, and they'll index them over time. So it's not that they can't find them, it's that they're not crawling them. So as soon as you add cross-linking across your articles, they already had the articles indexed, but now they're crawling them more. And when they crawl them more, now you get more traffic. So a common thing is a company launches 1,000 new pages, and it takes 6 months for all of them to get indexed, but they eventually do. Why did that happen? It's because you didn't have cross-linking. You had your sitemap, and you had your XML sitemap, your HTML sitemap, and then you submitted the URL with the API, but they're still not finding it. And then when they find it and index it, they're not getting traffic. Why are they not getting traffic? Because you didn't have enough cross-linking. So cross-linking increases the crawl rate, and the crawl rate increases the rank and the traffic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's funny enough that this exact thing has happened to us this past couple of months. We just launched a series of what you called category pages for a bunch of analysis that we've been doing for years for ads that other companies have produced. They were all in the newsletter, and now we have like these category pages for every single ad and like an analysis on the ad. And I went into the Search Console before our call and noticed that like a massive majority of them have not even been indexed yet. And it was just such an interesting thing. So the next thing I'm going to do is go and add a lot of cross-linking to all these pages because it clearly is going to help that process become faster. But Ethan, thank you so much for this. It feels like you're like a wealth of knowledge of SEO, and I've probably just touched the surface. We could have spent now 2 hours on understanding how you do your work at Graphite and how you've been thinking about this channel as a growth channel for companies for the past most of your career. So I really appreciate your time here, and I'm excited to apply some of these learnings already to our own work. And I hope to have you again sometime soon and have you talk more about all the successes that you've been behind it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, and that's a wrap with Ethan. I'm so grateful for having spent the time with him, understanding SEO a little bit better. I'm getting to understand his process. It was quite interesting to think about pinpointing or putting against SEO budgets with other programs like paid. It's an interesting problem that you have to deal with as a CMO or founder in terms of how to allocate your resources and budgets and efforts towards these different programs that have very different return timelines. It's an interesting problem to think about if you're trying to make some of these decisions, and hopefully that was a bit helpful for you to think through that. As always, if you're enjoying these shows or have feedback, please email me at nima@paramel.com or subscribe and follow us on the different channels that you're listening to us to. I really appreciate it. The next person on the podcast is going to be very different. We got a growth engineer coming on. It's going to be a little bit more technical, but I think it's going to be interesting. And we also are telling the story of StockX with the next one as well. So there's a couple of really interesting guests coming on, and I'm excited for you to listen to them and hear how people enjoy these. So appreciate it. Have a good one.